Today we're going to be talking about domestic violence. What do we see in a lot of people that we work with as far as some of the signs? And I guess one of the main questions is when they come to us, they want to know, how do they know that they're being abused? So what are some of the signs that we see typically?
One of the things that happens over time is it's a little bit like the wearing down of water on a rock. And so the person may have started out with self-esteem and feeling really good about themselves, and over time that gets really diminished because the person is criticizing them or poking fun at some of the things they believe in. And it can be what the person is calling, oh, I'm just teasing you. And over time, you just kind of laugh it off and, oh, well, they didn't mean it, and it doesn't feel that bad. But over time it does.
And I think kind of on top of what she was saying is there's sometimes this thing called gaslighting, where a person over time is made to feel like either they forgot about something, or they just perceived it the wrong way, or they start to blame themselves. Well, had I been more vigilant about how I keep the house clean, or had I remembered that he's always moody when he comes home after work, and I need to make sure I have his dinner ready. I said I was going to do these things. So in turn it makes them think that they're the problem. And it just continues over that. And there's also isolation. So, if they're around friends and family, or their friends might point out, hey, I haven't seen, I've noticed some things different about you, but over time in abusive relationships, they don't want other people around. So they don't have friends, family around. They may even move to another town. And so over time, this is the person they rely on to let them know that, who they are, what they need. They're restricted to the home. And they don't realize that, something here's not right. Because no one else is there to kind of point it out to them or help them see it.
I think one of the things that I see is that because domestic violence is often generational, people that come in to be seen are feeling like their experience is normal. And because of that, some of the things that they're talking about, they feel embarrassed about bringing it up because they don't think that it's necessarily something that is worthy of a visit to a therapist. Some of the comments that I have heard, especially from women, are, well, my mother had the same relationship with my father. Another common statement is, well, it's just the way he is, and even though he doesn't, he's not nice to me, at least he doesn't beat me. So there's these levels of, well, sure, he's this, but he's not that, or she's this and she's not that. So the normalization of that over generations is one of the reasons that it gets so embedded in our culture, and it's difficult for people to come forward and ask for help for something that they've perhaps grown up with, and perhaps perhaps their children are learning those same lessons, and so it's sort of trickling down.
Yeah, and I like how you use the word normalize, because a lot of times people get stuck in these relationships, and there's a lot of people that don't understand that. They might look at that from the outside and say, well, why are they staying in that relationship? And statistically, people will actually stay in an abusive relationship for up to 10 years before leaving, and that kind of helps explain it because it becomes normal. There's a lot of self-blame. There's a lot of guilt. These are some of the things that the abusers will use to their benefit. Which maybe leads us to the next question is, what are some of the things that we typically see in the abuser? Are there any signs, symptoms, or characteristics to look for, or that are common?
I would say that the abuser needs to be right and to have control. That they like to dominate, and that it's usually a persistent feeling. It's a low self-esteem on their part as well, and so they pick a person who is vulnerable and who might look up to them in the beginning and feel like they're going to protect them, when in reality they're not doing that at all, they're controlling. And then the cycle starts where he's nice, he's wonderful, and then he isn't so nice.
So very charming in the beginning.
Yes,
Yes.
very charming.
That's interesting. I've had clients that'll tell me, in the beginning it was just like moonlight and roses, and he paid all this attention to me, and that makes a person feel special and important. When things start to get a little strange, though, is when you don't call him back right away, and he loses it, or you're not texting him back. Well, where are you? Who were you with? Oh, I'm just worried about you. I'm concerned. And so they try to come off as just being overly concerned, and then the other person will be like, oh, they're just concerned, and they're being cute, and he just really loves me, really cares about me. But when it becomes to the point where it's excessive, it's out of where he can't reach you by phone, maybe because you're upstairs cleaning and your phone's downstairs, and shows up at your house. That might be a kind of a sign that maybe we need to slow things down and kind of reevaluate what's going on here. But again, they do find people that are in a particular place in life where they are vulnerable and they feel they're looking for a relationship. They're looking for that special someone, and they fit that.
Somebody that they can control.
Mm-hmm. And so all of a sudden, this person may find, well, I'll help you with your finances. And then they don't have control over their finances. Mm-hmm. Or, let me help you with your house. And then all of a sudden, they moved in and the person loses control of leaving their house. Or having control when they leave their house. Or it's just a little by little gradual losing of their own control. Well, you don't really need to work now because I'll take care of you. Or you don't really need to go out with your girlfriends. They were okay when you didn't have me, but now you have me on.
And that's where it becomes insidious, because it's a slow progression.
Yes.
It's such a slow progression, it's almost imperceivable. Mm-hmm. And then they become so dependent on them that they're trapped.
One of the comments that someone made to me years ago was, it became harder to leave than to stay. And that really stuck with me. And this was someone that we actually supported to eventually leave the home where she was being abused. And unfortunately, very quickly she returned. And that's a common theme in folks who do eventually find a way out. Just like any behavior that is maladaptive or seductive, it's very easy to get lured back in, and it happens a lot. And so the person that has that control over you also can have that control over you even when you're not in his or her presence.
That's right.
And
because they start making those promises again, and they go back into the honeymoon phase.
yes,
Well, of sending flowers, leaving notes on the car, getting right back into, but you know how much I love you and how much you mean to me. And so it's like the fish on the line, being reeled back in.
and I think I'd go on to say that sometimes victims of domestic violence begin to feel responsible for the person who's abusing them. And I've had clients say, I'm afraid he'll kill himself if I'm not with him. I'm worried that he won't be able to keep his job. So sometimes victims start to assume responsibility for the well-being of the abuser. And I think that's part of that manipulation that goes on, and it's really hard to get untangled from that faulty thinking.
Interesting, yeah. I mean, you brought up a good point too, because a lot of times you hear that the most dangerous point in time for the victim is when they leave. Because they fear for themselves, but you're right, they also fear and take on that responsibility of the abuser.
Sometimes families want to stay together, and sometimes families do give up on the family system too soon. And so family therapy is an option if the entire family is willing to participate. And sometimes that means that the spouses that are involved in the domestic violence also have marriage counseling in addition to the family counseling. So not all marriages and families that experience domestic violence are doomed. There is always hope that people can learn to be another way and can learn to communicate another way.
My recommendation would be that, depending on the level of strength of the individuals, and the willingness to change and the degree of violence, and to assess for family therapy, and then to do individual therapy and see if that person can change and is willing to change.
So just to wrap it up, because we're running out of time, well, let's just talk briefly about what do we do to help these victims? What kind of treatments or advice do we do when we're working with these people?
Well, I think from my perspective, and oftentimes when I see clients, their kids and their kids that have been living with domestic violence for a long time, and either they have observed that or they've actually been victims, they've actually been physically abused or emotionally abused. And in those instances, there are a lot of symptoms that sometimes will mimic other types of diagnoses. Like, for example, a child may come in and be diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder, or perhaps even bipolar disorder, because their mood is very labile. But in reality, what those symptoms are just manifestation of complex trauma. And I think if you can take a look at the message behind their behavior and take a good history and see what it is that they're using their behavior for as their protective factors, then you can start to unwind that and get down to the root of the real diagnosis, which is usually PTSD.
Yeah, I think it's looking at the PTSD symptoms and using, this is a good place to use resilience and when was the time you were strong and felt good about yourself, and go back to those times and build up their strength and self-esteem, and look at using EMDR as a possible treatment.
And I think if they're still in the relationship and they haven't left yet, but they're planning to, is to do a safety plan to get their paperwork in order, make copies, have extra set of keys, even clothes and money put aside, so when it's time to go, they're ready.
Yes.
And they're not leaving when he's there or she's there.
Right.
Because that's when things can get really physically violent. And so making that plan, planning ahead, moving away, not leaving a forwarding address. Because when that's the, like we said earlier, that's the most vulnerable time for that person, that victim. And so if we can prepare them, providing them with a list of even like what room to go into.
Yes.
If there is an altercation, don't go into the kitchen. Go into a child's room, or go into where there's things that are soft, where there's a window, things like that, where you can get out and go.
And what resources are available? I mean, even locally, but what resources are available?
Coastal Women's Shelter is available for women. I know.
Okay.
Is it RCS?
RCS is available.
Religious Community Services has shelter.
Which one?
Religious Community Services in New Bern has shelter, and there are also churches in Carteret County, which isn't far from here, where families who are homeless can stay in a different church a week at a time for up to 7 weeks. No, sorry, the name of that's eluding me right now, but.
Okay, well, we'll provide a list of those too, but the important thing is to get help. And you need a support group, you need support. And thank you for joining us with Inner Source Therapy. And if you like us, please leave a comment. Please visit our website, and we are available for questions and answers. And if you have a question or a topic that you'd like for us to discuss, go ahead and leave that in the comments.